Corey, what experience have you had studying the Gus Mells on offense or coaching against him?
Yeah, I think this is probably the first time. I think maybe last year, one time we came across someone kind of similar, but really the first time coaching against him.
Coach, for you, just 4 games in, how would you evaluate how the defense is overall, and how do you feel the guys have bought into the system that you've been implementing?
I think, every week I think we're playing faster. I think guys are trusting the technique. I think our communication's getting better. That was a big thing we worked on last week, though, just going back to the fundamentals, going back to the communication, just trying to be a little bit more detailed in how we go about everything we do on defense. The fundamentals, the techniques, the alignments, and trying to clean that up.
Tony Tesselow's obviously been one of the nation's better, dual threat guys, running quarterbacks, whatever you want to call him. How difficult is it to be able to get a good pass rush while also making sure you're guarding the rushing lanes to make sure he doesn't take off and just run 20 yards and get pressure?
Yeah, I think at any point, they run the football really well. And, down and distance out, I think they can run it at any time. We have to do a great job with, containing the quarterback, caging the quarterback, having a guy underneath, making sure we have eyes on him. And it always adds a different element to what you're doing when you have to defend that quarterback well.
Obviously, Ruben Dane's been, if not one of the best defensive players in the country, arguably one of the best players in the country, period, so far. Is there anything that he's done so far this year that's surprised you? I'm sure you knew you were getting a good player in him, but the way he's played in the first 4 games, how much does that impression or surprise you?
Yeah, I think, he's been a dominant player. I think what he did this offseason, as how he took care of his body, the way he works, the way he gets the extra reps in practice, how he's gone about his fundamentals and techniques, and then, how he attacks every single day, that's what shows up on the field. And, I think if you work at it constantly in the offseason, summer, in the winter, spring football, it's now showing what he did in this offseason. And I think helping to have him on edge a little bit, has allowed him to play fast within this defense.
You guys have been really good on third down this year. Obviously, 0 for 13 for Florida last time out. Just in the simplest form, what made this a successful third down defense?
And I think last week the biggest thing was, we stayed on track throughout the downs. We had a lot of third and off tracks. I thought our guys executed the details when they were third and manageable. And, I think it's just, every week you get different situations, you get a little bit of a different style, and I thought our guys executed really well within those situations in those schemes. Fourth down, we got to clean that one up. They were 3 for 6. So that's an area, it's 4 down territory. They're going for back-to-back plays. We have to do a better job in that situation getting off the field.
They do a lot of, I'll just use the word exotic things offensively. They try to create deception. How does that impact, you and your preparation for the game?
Yeah, our guys have to be really detailed with their eyes. Our alignments are huge this week. Our eye discipline, our communication, understanding what the final picture is. Our guys just need to make sure we're communicating and they both see the same picture the same way. Whoever it is that's working together on every set play. And, and that's going to be the number one thing is, we can't be peeking in the backfield. We can't be looking at the wrong things. We got to be detailed on where our eyes were and where our fits are every single play.
As a defensive coach, how do you keep that from creating tentativeness?
Yeah, the number one thing is as we feel it out in practice every week, it's how do we play as fast as we possibly can. And, that depending how we call it, how we, put in certain things, that's going to be the number one thing. So we want to make sure we're still playing fast as a unit. We still want our guys to be comfortable, communicate well together, and then be able to play to speed where we always feel like we're attacking on defense. That'll be the number one goal.
How does the speed of this FSU offense compare to what you guys have played against at this point?
Yeah, I think they use it at times. I think they don't. I think it'll be similar at times to what we saw versus South Florida. I think it's, there's times where I think they're going really fast. And then there's other times, they slow it down. I don't know if it's because of the game situation or the score or, what it is in the game, where they do it. But we just have to be ready for everything. We got to be ready to go very, very fast like we did a couple of weeks ago. We have to be ready for them to huddle up and do some different things or not go as fast in certain situations. And, that's something that we got to practice all week. And, we've kind of been doing with our guys, and we're going to continue to emphasize that until we get the kickoff.
I think the offense had 25 yards in the first half. Have you ever experienced that as a coach? And then what's the message to your defense when it's going to have at halftime?
Yeah, the biggest thing last week was, playing a full game, playing a complete 4-quarter game. We felt every game we've kind of had, Notre Dame in the 4th quarter. We got to play better. South Florida, we got to play better at the finish of the game. Bethune, same thing. We got to play a more complete game. And that was the number one thing we wanted to try to accomplish or emphasize last week as we went through that game. And I still think we had one drive. We got to do a better job. They went 11 plays. They scored a touchdown. And at that point, it becomes a game again. So now we got to, and that's the emphasis of practice. Tuesday is going to be a full, complete practice all the way through. Wednesday is going to be a full, complete practice all the way through. Every situation, we got to make sure we're cleaning up every day. Because we still, the emphasis on defense is we still want to play a more complete game than we've played so far. And, every play has a life and history of its own. Every series has its own situation. And you never know what happens in a game. First quarter is completely different than the second quarter. And our guys, every series, we got to take the approach of, hey, it's play one. We got to get a line, do our job, have our eyes in the right spot. Okay, play two. You never know what's going to happen. South Florida hits a big explosive, we have to respond. We got to hold them in the field, get off the field. Florida, same thing. They start of the 3rd quarter, they drove the ball down the field. We need to respond in that situation and get a huge 4th down stop in the next series. And that's where I thought our guys, are continuing to get better and improving every single week. To be able to now step up and get that stop on that second drive of the 3rd quarter. But it's still an emphasis that we're going to have in practice tomorrow. We're going to have it on Wednesday. We have to constantly get better and more detailed, so that now we can limit some of those situations.
Obviously, there's been a lot of attention on Ruben Bain and Keem Bethor, and they deserve it. How would you look, looking at the interior of the defensive line, how would you grade how they've done so far?
Yeah, I think our guys have done a really good job, within the scheme. I think our guys are doing a really good job of situational football right now. Moten continues to play faster every single week. From Scott getting that forced fumble, coming out the stacks against Notre Dame, to Blay knocking the line of scrimmage back and doing his job really well every play. There's still little details that we got to get cleaned up. Last week I thought the 1 4th down early in the game, I thought if we do our job, we should be off the field. It was a little bit of, really all 3 levels with communication, a little bit of technique. But I think the D line right now is continuing to play at a higher level every week. And I think whichever guy you take, Mondo's done a really good job stepping in different situations. Lightfoot's done a really good job, but you got to take that whole room, and guys are constantly, playing faster in their roles every week as we go.
Deuce Robinson, their top receivers, what challenges could you present to your secondary?
Yeah, I think, you watch what he did last week. On the perimeter, he runs good routes, that back shoulder fade, he catches really well. His size is always going to be a challenge. I think he's a good football player. He's got a huge catch radius. He finds windows. He understands how to get open, and I think he makes a lot of really good plays. So that's something that obviously we got to be aware of where he is on the field at all times.
How's the red zone defense? How would you assess how that's been going for you guys so far?
Yeah, that's one. I think you start with the opener. We get them 3rd and off track. They scramble. We lose contain, and we come out of coverage. You want to hold them to 3 there. Same thing, I'm trying to think of South Florida. We had a shot to get off the field. I think it was 3rd and 7. They throw a tunnel screen. We got to set an edge. We got to get off the field. We got to finish in those situations. We've had a 4th down stop to get off. Last week we didn't get the 4th down stop against Florida. I think they had a 4th and 2 or 4th and 3. They run quarterback run to the boundary. We got to make sure we're setting the edge. And we got to get vertical as we get off the football. And it's one of those areas where I think we're putting ourselves in a good spot, but we got to finish the drive. We got to finish the situation to make sure we're not giving up any 4-point plays. We got to make sure that's going to be a 3-point field goal, or we're going to get taken in those situations. And that's something that we're still working at improving on every single week.
This is college football where it doesn't seem to be as physical as it used to be. Your guys seem to get to the tackle and run through their tackles. They're hitting hard. They don't hesitate. What is your message to them when it comes to turning the tackling and being aggressive?
So when our tackling system here is, we want to press the hip. We're nose up. We want to bite the ball. We're coming in at an angle. We want to wrap and roll. We're out of phase. We want to sweep the ankle. And then we talk a lot about half-man tackles, working our leverage, understanding our leverage, and we want to take our shot. We don't want to break down. We don't want to settle. You know, we always want to go take our shot on the ball carrier. And as long as we swarm to the football, we feel like, you know, the first guy's there, and doesn't clean up the tackle, the second or third guy with the swarm will be able to finish the play. And that's where I think, you know, we teach our guys to tackle in an aggressive manner. We want to play fast and go take our shot through the tackles. And I think that's what's showing up on film right now.
Anything else?
You've had pretty good success. I think we talked about this once before the season, but you've had pretty good success with running quarterbacks. Is this guy a little different than your typical running quarterback?
Yeah, I think he's really talented. You know, at any point, you know, you watch him, he's had games where he throws the ball really well. You know, he's always a threat in the running game. You know, it's always a +1 count. That you know, you got to have an extra hat in the box. And, you know, I think he's a really talented player. He gives you a lot of challenges on defense. And, you know, we got to do a great job up front. You know, the line of scrimmage is going to be huge in this game. We got to do a great job of winning at the point of attack, winning at the line of scrimmage, and you know, we got to make sure we tackle when we have our opportunities. We got to close gaps, and you know, we got to win our one-on-ones. And we got to make sure we tackle them and get them down. But you know, he's a challenging player that does a really good job.